how we communicate matters. Now, I'm not talking about which language we use, but the style of communication to get the outcomes we desire. Now, we've probably all had encounters with people who are all over the spectrum of communication styles, right? We have there's the really abrasive, and there's the whisperer, and the hardline debater, and the pushover, and everywhere in between. We probably have taken several different stances in our communication styles over the years, and maybe over a day. And how we learn to communicate comes from our families and our teachers and our friends and our mentors, and the communication styles we may pick up from whatever radio or TV, it comes from everywhere. And you may have noticed that some of these communication styles are more effective than others. And some of them are more life-fulfilling and skillful than others. And I think most of us at some point might have picked up a non-skillful or maybe even hurtful way of communicating, at least sometimes. But it hasn't always been this way. Newborn babies, they did all sorts of research, right? They respond to the crying of other babies the same age. If you have a newborn baby and you play a recording of a 10-month-old crying, they don't seem to care so much. But if you play a recording of a newborn, they cry as well. They know there's something in that. They have that same empathy connection. And they will show distress when others around them are experiencing distress. A small child, toddler, will see that someone around them needs help with something, and they will help to the best of their ability. So this desire to be helpful and empathetic and compassionate is hardwired because nobody taught the toddler to do that. Nobody taught the baby that. They knew that. So somewhere along the line, some of us, we drift away from this completely compassionate way of seeing the world. And maybe somewhere along the line, someone was unkind. It just happens, right? Because we all come from our own experience. But we can go back. We can backtrack whatever maybe not so helpful habits we have learned. We can backtrack and learn new habits. We can get our needs met, and we can learn to interact with each other in a peaceful way. And nonviolent communication, which we're starting our study group on this week, is been used by its creator, Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, and his trainers around the world in, we would call them hot spots of communities with things going on all over the world to work for peace. But what is nonviolent communication? Gandhi used the word nonviolence to refer to our natural state of compassion when violence has subsided from the heart. Our natural state of compassion is when violence has subsided from the heart. Now, I'm not saying that any of you have a particularly violent heart. Probably not. But what if instead of violent we used unkind or even hurting? Because if we come from a hurting heart, well, sometimes we hurt because hurt others because we're coming from a hurting heart. See, when we're hurting or we feel like someone's hurt us or trying to be mean, we can sometimes maybe respond with unkind or violent words. Has anybody other than me done that? Okay, we have a couple of admitters. That's good, thank you. But if we want to have more peace on the earth, if we want to have more harmony in the earth, and we sing the song, "Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me," well, it's time to get real about this stuff, right? Now, we can certainly begin by being more mindful of our words and actions and work to use kindness and make amends where we've been unkind. But to really embrace and transform how we communicate, I'm a big fan of using nonviolent communication. I was just talking with LaDora before service. You know, we pull out our books and we start looking at this stuff. It's like, oh wow, I kind of fallen a little bit off the wagon here. So it's really helpful that we're getting ourselves back in shape. Now, it takes time and practice, and to really embrace and use NVC, that's what they call it, NVC, it takes some practice. But I'm going to share the basic outline with you and see how we can transform our relationships. So there's 4 basic steps. They're actually pretty easy. The instructions are always easy. It's the practice part, right? Yeah. So the first step is observation. Now this is how a camera would see what happens, not with all the story that we attach to an occurrence, but just the facts, ma'am, kind of. So Bob left piles of papers on the table and then left the house. No story. That's exactly what happened, right? So that's the observation. So if I was having a conversation with this fictional person, Bob, I would say, Bob, when you left piles of paper on the table and then left. That would be step 1. Part 2 is feelings. Now, you can't say, I feel like you betrayed me, because that's not a real feeling. That's a judgment. You might say, I felt disappointed. Wait, that's not what I want to say. Disappointed is not a real feeling. I felt annoyed. I could feel annoyed. Or I could feel exasperated. So you would say your feelings. Not blaming. That's not feelings. And then, that's step 2. Step 3 is needs. So there's universal needs that we all have. And some of them are things we probably, we have needs for shelter and food, but we also have needs for connection and joy and expression and all of these other things. So the third step is to say our needs. So maybe you had a need for order. That's a very common need. And then step 4 is a request. Now, to be a true request, it's a request, not a command. A request means that the person can say no. So a request is, don't be a jerk like that again. That's not a request. A request is, would you consider cleaning up the piles before you leave next time? And then Bob would say, no. Because that's a true request. But you've stated not just, hey, don't leave your stuff around. You've stated what happened, how you felt, what you need, and then you've made a request. So when you get to the end of this 4-step process, this is then their turn to reply back and share maybe their feelings and needs about the situation. And maybe they have a counter request. But anyway, we're going to see it in action. We have some lovely volunteers who created we're going to have an argument with us for us.
Oh, we don't argue.
Was that a request?
Body language.
I can't believe it. You do this to me all the time. Here you are sheetrocking and it's 2 hours before the party starts.
You
What?
want me to get it done?
Get it done? In 2 years, maybe.
Well, I'm trying to do what you've asked me to do. Trying to do what you've asked me to do. What's with you?
So what are we gonna do when the people arrive and the floor's dirty and the kitchen's a mess?
Well, you didn't say anything. I thought I was supposed to do what I was doing.
Well, this isn't working.
Would you like to rewind and do it again?
Yeah, let's
We'd like to rewind. And I
Rewind.
gotta tell you, it took us a long time to come up with a fight.
So I'm still having all these explosive feelings, and I still want to get my point across to Sue. And it's very difficult in that moment to switch gears. I've tried it, it's really hard. And so one of the things I need to do is to stop and take a deep breath. Just in and out. And remember the steps. Sue, I noticed that you're sheetrocking.
Yeah, it's really coming along.
And it's 2 hours before our guests arrive.
Really?
Yeah, it is. I'm feeling really overwhelmed with everything that has to be done at the house, with the house, because I want it to look nice when people arrive. I wonder if you could help me with the rest of the house a little bit.
Oh, LaDora, I had no idea you were feeling overwhelmed. I was just trying to get this part of the wall done before the company comes. It'll take me about 20 minutes to finish and clean up my mess, and then I'll hit the house like a tornado.
Sounds
that-
good?
Would that work?
Yeah, that's much better, thanks.
Wonderful.
Aww.
Can I borrow you too?
Yeah, bravo, thank you. So, there was a few great things there, right? LaDora went, oh wait, I need to take a breath and get centered and connect with who I am, where I'm at, what's going on with me to begin with. Because there's, the first thing you gotta know is that with nonviolent communication, we take responsibility for our own feelings. It's not somebody else's fault that we feel a certain way. We feel a certain way because our needs aren't being met. And with nonviolent communication, we learn that we can find ways to heal that and do that on our own. And of course, you have to dig deeper into the book and the class, to really understand how all that works. But it does work. And so the most important, it's important to remember that it's not their fault that I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling. There's an unmet need, which might be the reason I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. And we can ask others to help us meet those needs, but they can also say no. And we get to find a place of empathy for ourselves and meet that need by ourselves. Quite some time ago, when I was starting the alternative worship service at Unity Village with my friend Jenny, we were approached by a person who was enjoying coming to our service, but she thought that we needed to add a whole nother element. 3-part service, she wanted it to be a 3.5-part service. And I was like, no. I didn't see how there was a lot of reasons why that particular request that she had wasn't gonna fit with our vision of what it was about. However, instead of just saying no, we thought about, well, what are the underlying needs that might have caused her to make this request? What was she looking for that might feel like it was missing? Instead of saying, well, the wages she asked for it, that's not going to work, so the answer is no. It's like, well, what is it that she feels like is missing that we can look at? So we said, I think that what she's looking for is a sense of community and ritual, and those are something that we can look at and make some tweaks to the 3 parts that existed and add those in to make it have some of those, more of those elements that she was looking for without taking away from the integrity of the service that we had planned. And it worked, because we stopped and looked at the underlying needs and just said, instead of, your strategy's no good. So when we use MVC, someone can say no to our request. But the truth is, usually, when we're willing to say, I feel this because I need this, even if someone's not willing to fill the request, your specific request, it's likely that they will be willing to be in conversation about how we can move forward together, even if their specific request isn't something that they feel comfortable agreeing to. They may say, so back to our example with Bob and the piles on the table, this is what someone could have responded to Bob. I hear that you're exasperated and annoyed because you need order. When I left the papers on the table and then left, so that's the observation, I felt frustrated and weary, the feelings, because I need understanding and competence. Those are the needs. Are you willing to share half the table with me and the piles for the next 2 weeks while I complete our taxes? So there's a more authentic, instead of just saying, I'll leave the stuff wherever I want, right? Which,
Or you do the taxes.
well, right. So there's lots of different ways that could have responded to. Instead, there's a responding, okay, I'm feeling frustrated maybe because, the taxes aren't doing what I wanted them to do, blah, 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 whatever, right? So if there's, Bob's feeling frustrated and overwhelmed or whatever. And so Bob's saying, hey, can we find a middle ground? And now, see, I find that to be a really reasonable request because there's a time frame to it, specific. A request is specific. It's not, my request is that you lay off. That is not a request. But it's, I really need this space on the table for the next 2 weeks, and there's I'll just use half the table or whatever. So now you could go back and forth as many times as you need to start teasing this out. Maybe we find out that Bob needs some extra help to figure this out. Maybe we find out whoever's, living with Bob can, do whatever. We can start actually having a conversation about what we need instead of just getting annoyed, getting mad, saying things we don't really want to say. We can actually have a conversation from our hearts. Now, it's important to note that getting in touch with our feelings and needs are not just for times of potential conflict. They're certainly helpful for us to be able to help manage ourselves and then connect with and manage our relationships. But just like Sue mentioned last week, she uses nonviolent communication to authentically acknowledge the waitstaff and other people who help her. The way that you were so accurate with bringing out my order really made me feel happy and acknowledged, and that fulfilled my need for comfort. And you don't have to say with those exact words and make it kind of sound choppy, but that's the general idea. When you can say specifically something somebody did to help you, and then tell them why and how it made a difference to you, that really hits it home. I have several people in my life who I've worked with closely on events, and when you're working an event with lots of people coming, things can get pretty hairy and stressful anyway. But these people I've worked with, it seems like how opposites attract. They are people who have a strong need for order. And if any of you have seen my desk, that's not my thing. However, I understand that these people have a need for order, and that helps them be able to function and be present and all of those things. And so when working with these people, I would do my best to keep our shared spaces neat, and even if I had things spread out, for them to have some order to it, so that it would help them feel grounded and strong, instead of that kind of knowing that that could throw them out of whack because we're already so intensely busy. And at the same time, these folks knew that I am a hurricane of efficiency, and so use their understanding instead of feeling triggered. Because when it, when you take it out of, oh, they're being a mess to mess with me, into, oh, this is how they process, I understand that about them, and I know that it will not stay like this for long. It's much easier to deal with that for a temporary period of time, right? So I hope that many of you will become part of the study group, because NBC is awesome. And our practices are called a language of life, because this is a new way of using our language to bring more life, to be life-giving. And so some of you, of course, won't be able to take the class or whatever. So what can we take from this practice? This is the take-home part. So start with an open mind. Start with a deep breath. When people are talking, they're often coming up with a strategy to meet a need that they may not have even known that they have, or that they recognize that they're missing. It may be buried under hurtful or flowery language, but this is where we get to pretend we're Sherlock Holmes and ask questions. Are you feeling worried because you need understanding? Are you feeling unsure because you need safety? You can ask questions. And you know what? If someone doesn't feel that feeling, they'll tell you. But usually they'll feel like, oh, someone's trying to understand me. And often they'll try to help you figure out how they're feeling. And sometimes just bringing the feelings out into the light is like, oh, okay, everything's okay now, because we've acknowledged a feeling. And, of course, if you do get it right, because if you're paying attention to what someone's saying, you probably can you're in the right neighborhood at least. They're going to think you're awesome because you understand them. So another thing to do is notice when you're being triggered. Maybe you realize in the moment that you're not responding in your most enlightened way. Now think a moment. If you take a moment, take a deep breath and say, what am I feeling right now? What's my need that's not being met? When we can remember what someone is saying is usually about their unmet needs, and we can pull ourselves out of the emotional loop and just listen, it can shift everything, because we take it from being a blame game, why didn't you do what I wanted you to do, and it's all your fault now, to a game of clarifying and healing and reconciliation. There are many things we can do to make the way we communicate more peaceful and authentic. And along with joining the study group, I welcome any of you to stop by or make an appointment if you'd like to work through using this method in your life. Sometimes just having another perspective can make all the difference. All the pieces start to fall into place. I've seen it do wonders for people. And like all the other life tools we talk about here, doing it well takes persistence and patience, which I know is frustrating sometimes. And this particular skill, I think, takes an extra dose of compassion. Because for ourselves, because we're going to end up doing a cha-cha, right? We're going to learn it, and then we're going to goof up, and we're going to learn it, and we're going to goof up. So just have patience in the cha-cha of life, have compassion that we're in the cha-cha of life, and remember that nonviolence is when you create in you a natural state of compassion where violence has subsided from the heart. It's a practice for a lifetime. So go in peace, speak peace, become peace.
And what I would just add to that was that in my taking the class, there's a lot of self-exploration in the class. And the time I did it, I learned when I get angry, it's because I'm afraid. And so, almost always. And so I can flip that over more quickly now and see what it is and deal with it. So, very interesting. You'll learn a lot about yourself.